Enabling Power Apps in your organization is a great step to empowering low-code development and create opportunities for cost and efficiency savings in your organization. However, it is important to start off on the right foot from a governance point of view too. So if you're new to the platform, I have done an overview video on what it includes, what it consists of. I'll pop a link to that in the top corner of the video. You can go through and take a look at all the different pieces that make the platform up, like Power Apps, Power Automate, Dataverse. But in this video, I wanted to share some insights into what the governance tools are that are available, both on the platform and sort of as add-ons to the platform as well. This should give you plenty of food for thought as to what the right approach for you and your organization would be in terms of governing new apps and flows and things that are created. So I'm Daniel Halls. I'm the Power Platform Consultant at FSP. Welcome to Power Platform Principles. Okay, so you want to, or maybe you already have, enabled the Power Platform in your organization. What does that mean? Well, it's a set of powerful, intuitive tools that enable users to create apps and workflows and reports and much more within your M365 tenant, your Microsoft 365 tenant. I won't dive too much into the detail of tenant licensing within this video. So just as a broad rule of thumb, if you work for an organization that has got Word, Excel, or PowerPoint online, it's quite likely that you have access to the Power Platform as well. This is great news because then you're on your way to being able to leverage those tools without any sort of an additional cost at that point to just create new efficiencies, workflows, and things that can benefit your organization. Sounds great, right? So just turn it on and let's go for it, right? Well, from a team of just a few people to a large-scale organization, you do want to sort of probably get a good understanding of what risks might come from just turning it on. In essence, what happens is you enable access to data sets to the platform via connectors. And I'm going to get into connectors later on. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the video. But basically, you connect Power Apps to your existing data on your tenant. So let's just do a little example of what that might look like and where some of these risks can come from. Because one of the biggest ones is inevitably access to data and potential data breaches or risks, because they can come in very, very different forms. So very simple scenario. Let's say you work on SharePoint, you have a list of client details, it's held securely, it's fully compliant with GDPR, and only the right people have access to it, which is great. Now, let's just say someone in that team decides to use Power Platform to create a Power BI report, to visualize that data in a much better way, to tell a better story with that data. Exactly what it's designed to be used for, and creates a beautiful report, and then shares it with a number of people across the business who then consume that report. You could inadvertently be surfacing information to a different audience than what it was intended to begin with, which could cause you some problems with that data set. The other thing as well that you could do with these data connectors that I mentioned earlier, there are a number of them that also include third-party tools. So you could connect that data source to a third-party connector like Dropbox. And now you might have your list of personal customer details being pushed into something like Dropbox, which is doable on the platform. So again, these would cause you some risks with your data. Lots of other bits and pieces as well. You know, the way we use data is important. So GDPR says we can only use it for what we gathered it for in the first place. If you gathered it for this reason and then you create a process on Power Platform to do something else, you could be constituting some risk to GDPR on your data as well. So there are those risks to consider. Now, that's enough fear-mongering for now. There's plenty that can be done, okay? But just wanted to highlight what you might need to think about with governance and what sort of guardrails you might need to put in place to manage and minimize those risks to your data so that you can stay compliant. So let's move on and look at how we can mitigate those risks that we mentioned there. So let's take a look at some of the different things that we like to discuss and workshop as part of that strategy. And the first thing that you can see on the screen here is an example Power Platform environment strategy. As a very brief introduction, and I will cover this in other videos at a later date around environments in more detail, because they are quite expansive and important to how we manage. An environment is basically a bucket of apps and flows and things that people create. And you can have more than one of these buckets with different purposes. So let's just talk about what we're showing you here. So I'm going to zoom in on the left, and you can see we've got this citizen developer, right? And a citizen developer is someone in the business who creates something with Power Platform, has got sort of three broad routes to what they might create. They might create an app for themselves. They might create an app or a flow for a team or a project, so specific to one thing within the business. Or they might create an app or a flow for a team or a project with sort of other requirements, right? And that will become clear in a moment. Then what you've also got is you've got this other role down here, what we would call an enterprise developer, for example. And they might create an app for themselves. They might also create an app for the whole organization, like a big business solution, or they might have an app with additional requirements, which we're going to cover in a moment. So what happens is that each path that they take will land them in a different bucket of environment, if we use that term bucket as the descriptor for now. So here we've got a blue default environment at the top. Now the default environment exists in every tenant in Microsoft 365 for Power Platform. It is the one where everything goes. And if you were to go to Power Platform right now and press create without doing anything else, your app would be built in the default environment. So this is for everyone. So therefore, it kind of needs to be the most secure. So we ring fence this off on its own to have a certain purpose. And a good example of the purpose here is we use it often for personal productivity. So the mindset should be, if I'm building an app or a flow that is for me, that doesn't have any real impact on the way the business operates, it should go in here. And that might be, I might want to build a workflow that says, tell me when my boss emails me. Yeah, tell me when my team member phones in sick so I can plan the rotas, right? It kind of helps me do what I'm doing, but it doesn't stop the business working. So everyone should have access to this to be able to make their life quicker and easier and more efficient. But at the same time, it should be more secure because there's so many people working in there. There's a greater risk. So we ring fence that on its own, and we surround it by this dashed DLP policy. I've got a section coming up on DLP policies, so I will cover that off later. But we secure that as a separate space. So everything that is for yourself lands in this bucket at the top. Next up, we've got this green ribbon, okay? And this green sort of row of environments has kind of got some application lifecycle management thrown into the thinking here. And just as an overview, we've got a development space, a test space, a UAT space, user acceptance testing, and a production environment here. So you can move between the types of environment depending on what you're doing with it. Again, no hard and fast rule on having 4 or having 7 or having 2, but it is recommended to have more than one. Yeah. I think Microsoft best practices actually outlines that you can potentially use 7 here. So you could have a dev, you could deploy into what would be, so dev test, so that testing space would be for me to test my stuff works, tinker around with it, test it, move it to UAT testing, put it into pre-production testing, put it into production. You know, there's lots of different steps that you can have there. This is when you're starting to get into the granularity of how you want people to work in the future, how we're going to support things, how we're going to deploy things. So for the sake of governance, we're just going to call this the department or project set of environments, okay? And in here, this is basically, I'm going to build an app for my team, yeah? And it might be that, let's say, my team and I work together on a particular finance spreadsheet. We want to take that spreadsheet and we want to make it more efficient by adding some workflows, adding some rules, some business validation. So we don't want it to be a spreadsheet anymore. We want to convert it into a data source. We want to have an app on the front end, and we want to have a workflow to make it much more efficient for us. Stick that in this environment, give access to my team, and this is where we work. Yeah. So this is a little bit more restricted by membership. Less people can access this. So therefore, we can do a bit more in here. Yeah, we can be a bit more fluid, and I'm only going to work with my data set for my team. So again, a little bit more secure, a little less open to the world. So it will have its own DLP policy protecting that area. Now, you might have multiple greens because you might have multiple teams. You might have multiple projects. That's fine. You'd have its own strand for each of those departments or projects. And again, this might not work for you. This might be overkill for some of the things that you want to deliver. But also at the same time, some of the more specific projects might really want to be secured away from everybody else because they're niche or they're sensitive. So again, gives you that option to do so. The red band becomes enterprise application, so anything that's being built for everyone to use. So you'd imagine there'd be a limited set of developers with expert skills, consultant skills, and so on that have gone and got business requirements, developed user stories, features, functions, and releasing, wave after wave of updates to the solution so that it can be replace big systems and so forth. You obviously want to pull that away from the team stuff and get it into a much more succinct development cycle. So we'd have a enterprise applications road for delivery as well. And that might have 4, that might have more, it might have less. This is the one that's likely to have more than the others because it's more aligned to a DevOps type process. And then what we always do is we always throw this sort of unique one at the end because every business has its fringe cases, right? It's not really for a team, it's for 2 teams. So whose environment does it live in? Now it could live across both, it could be shared, but actually you could also have let's put it in here. But also there could be unique license requirements, there could be additional features that are required, things that need to be turned on the platform that can only be done for the whole environment rather than just for one application. And you get a lot of features like this that need to be turned on for certain things. I'll give you a really simple example. Premium mapping as a feature. You can turn that on, but you only turn it on for the whole environment. And if you don't want the whole environment using premium mapping, then you need to separate that away from the environment and put it somewhere else because that would make it available for everyone in that environment. Simple one. There's lots of others as well. So what we would do here is we would want to workshop what this might look like for you and your organization. Everyone has a default. Most people have teams. Enterprise is an obvious one if you're choosing to build bigger solutions, and purple is kind of an extra one. But there could be unique use cases for you that you'd want to talk through how they might work and manage and so on. So that's an example of an environment sort of map, if you like, and how that might be configured. There's lots of things you'd need to consider, which is why we workshop it. Things like license costs, storage space, usage, user groups, access, permissions. We're going to park all of that for now because we just want to give you an oversight of that. And I will cover environments in much more detail separately because there's a whole branch of stuff that comes with environments. So moving on, over here, there's another diagram. This is another useful one that we like to work through with clients. And this is the example of a front door or governance process. Now, this is just a mock-up starter for 10. Here's some typical things that you need to think about as an organization. But where I find this really useful is this helps you sort out who is responsible for what, right? And knowing who's responsible for what will show you as an organization, one, where your skills gaps might be. So you might have an existing business team that's going to support Power Platform, but do they have enough knowledge to be able to do so? Or at the same time, is it already an existing role in the business? Or do we need to upskill or bring in some support to be able to deliver that? And 2, if the business is asking for stuff on Power Apps, who's going to build it? Who's going to support it? Where's it going to live? How do we manage that in 5 years' time when it's a really relied on business tool and it breaks? Right, so this is what this is outlined to cover. So from here, what we do is we work through kind of the typical phases, and they might not be exactly the same for every organization, and you might not use the same sets of tools here, but you start with this and we reshape it to fit what you need it to be. So just as an overview, typically there is a business governance process. That might be an existing TDA, that might be an existing board, that might be an existing sign-off process. There's kind of a bucket for governance, which usually exists within an organization. There's the business function itself, the team that wants the thing built. The green bit in the middle is really the sort of green bucket of tools that you're going to get to support it. And one of the things that I mention in here, you'll see this abbreviation COE. It means Centre of Excellence, and I have got a section on that later in this video, so we will come back to that. Then there's what I call the Power Platform support team. Now that doesn't have to be a specific team formulated to do this, but some organisations do have one. It might be, as I said earlier, an existing technical team that's going to pick up some of the responsibilities of Power Platform because they already do other similar roles. You might not have anybody at all, and you just need to understand who you might need in that sort of facilitating role. And then third party could be anyone from supplier, expert knowledge brought in to manage delivery of something. And then the phases that we sort of go through, there's the capture requirements. What are we going to build? There's the analyze requirements. Okay, what do they mean? Are they fit for purpose? Are they good? Are they things that we want to build? Then you go to a governance sign off. Okay, that's a good idea. Do we have the money, resource, and time and the want to build that thing? And if so, is it then going to be done on the right platform in the right way? And then you've got enablement of delivery, so build the thing. And then you've got go live, right? And go live throws up some unique challenges in Power Platform, because if you have a citizen developed solution, right? Somebody in the business builds a thing, and like I said earlier, over time it becomes more useful and more used. Eventually you get to the point where it might break, or somebody new starts and they don't have access to it. Who's going to manage I need access to that thing? Or are they going to phone your existing help desk and say, I'm using this app and it's not working? To which the other end of the phone, the help desk is going to go, I don't know what app you mean. It wasn't built by us and we don't support it. Where does that leave users in that journey long term? And often we start talking about things like, do you have an automated process that says, if we build a thing, let's create a record on your ServiceNow solution that says this system was built by this person in the business. Contact them here for any access, help, or support. And it might be as simple as that. Sometimes it gets more complicated and depends on whether it's access or so on. But the point we get here is basically at the start of this flow, we work through what's the ask, right? We ask to create something, we log it somewhere, then we go through and review it, we make sure we've got all the requirements, can they build it themselves, do we see if there's anything existing already, then we go through to a kind of a feasibility, do we do it, yes or no, does it need sign off from TDA, and go through that governance hoop. So the idea is that we will workshop the process of governance and start putting names against the boxes. Who does this role in your business? So that's governance. And just wanted to share those two parts because they often form, alongside with the environment strategy, they often form the backbone of what your governance strategy would look like. So that's how we would workshop those ideas. And there's also lots of considerations around the tools that you would use. I've mentioned lightly there the Centre of Excellence. We're going to come on to that later. But there's also things like managed environments, DevOps or Power Platform pipelines. There's lots of other tools like putting things into solutions and creating deployment profiles, and lots of other sort of tools and things that would need to be fed into that strategy is to say, what's the right level of tool for this piece of governance? For some people, it might be that this big DevOps approach is too heavy-handed and not required. But at the same time, there are organizations that are on a scale that work in that way already, and it would fit quite nicely with. And that workshop is to understand what does the Power Platform have and what can we add to it to make a good governance strategy. So for this video, I'm going to focus on the two biggest, more holistic tools that we use to govern, secure, and control the platform. First up is data loss prevention policies. So DLP is what I'll refer to those two, and you probably will have noticed those in the environment strategy section that we looked at earlier. So now you have a clearly defined strategy where things can be created and how users can request for other things to be created and spaces for those to go into. We'll look at how we secure each of those with policies. Going back to that example, we had a set of environments, or we had an environment called personal productivity. That's a space for everyone to create freely, things that are for them to use for themselves, workflows and the like. So it should be, therefore, the most secure, as it carries its higher risk. To secure this, we need to understand that, as I have mentioned, Power Platform runs on connectors, and of which, right now, as of recording, there are over 1,300, and it's growing weekly. So there's a lot of connectors out there. A connector is basically an API, an open connection to different sources of data or process that can be run. So you might have a connector to SharePoint, a connector to Outlook, a connector to Word to do some word processing. Excel has got a connector, some very obvious Microsoft-based ones. That's just a few of what is a very long, expansive list. Third party to this, there are connectors like Dropbox, Google Drive, and various other sort of third-party external tools that have been partnered with and sharing OpenAI connectors, API connectors with Microsoft, so you can connect into other data sources as well. They come in two flavors. I won't get into licensing, as I said earlier. They come in standard, available for free, essentially with your platform, and premium, cost you extra to use every single month. So two different types. For the purpose of today, we just need to understand that there are connectors. So what you need to do is define in your environment strategy which ones are allowed to be used and stop any that are not allowed to be used. And to do that, I'm going to look at a DLP policy and how it's set up. So here we have the Power Platform Admin Center for just a complete dev tenant. It's my throwaway, mess around myself, not use any actual real business data of anybody's, just create stuff. And as you can see, I'm down the left-hand side, navigated to policies, and I've selected data policies. So data policies are created and they are applied in different ways to different environments across your organization. So they are not singular to one environment, they can go across multiples if you need them to. So I'm just going to create a new policy and show you some of the things you can and can't do with them. So a new policy, we're going to call it test. Oh, no, I'm not, because I can't seem to type like so. We're going to go to next. We often get this little warning flash up. It takes a moment to load the data. Actually, that does work properly once you're here. It's just telling you it takes a little while to pull the full list together. I said 1,300, I was close. There's 1,242 in the list at the current time of recording. And what it's done here is it's put all of these pre-built connectors, the ones that Microsoft let us use, into non-business. There's three categories of security on a connector. You've got business, non-business, and blocked. And I'll just explain how this works, because there's a slight different rule on what you do with the different connectors in the different spaces. If I put all of my connectors into business, they're all able to be used in whatever environment I apply this policy to. If I put all of my connectors as they are in non-business and apply this to an environment, they can all be used, right? If I put them all in blocked, you can't use any of them, though you can't block every connector. I'll cover that in a moment. But the business, non-business blocked is three separate buckets, but seemingly only two actions. Business is enabled, non-business is enabled, and blocked is blocked. Where it becomes slightly different is if you have a connector in business and a different connector in blocked. And how that works is, let's say, for example, I want to allow SharePoint. I can move this. I can't block it. I'll come back to that in a second. I can move it to business. Okay, so that's now in business. But let's say I want to keep Outlook in non-business. I probably wouldn't, but just for the sake of my argument, we've now got SharePoint in business and Outlook in non-business. If I build an app in an environment using this policy, I can create an app with a SharePoint connection. I can create a second app with an Outlook connection, but I couldn't create an app that uses both of them at the same time because business and non-business cannot work together. The idea here is that you might be allowing people to use things like there are Twitter connectors, X connectors, right? In the list of things that you can use. There are LinkedIn connectors in here. So what you probably say is, well, we don't want to push all of our business data into there. So let's keep SharePoint and LinkedIn away from each other. Business, non-business. If I create an app that is all social, fine, fill your boots, you can go and do that. If I create an app that is business and getting business data, I can do that. I can't merge the two together. Business, non-business. Blocked is fairly straightforward. It is just blocked. However, you cannot block anything that was made by Microsoft, which is, I suppose, a little bit annoying to a degree, because if I filter the Microsoft one, you will see there are some that are a little bit questionable, but there are ways around that, and we cover that when we work with organizations. So for example, this is my normal example, there is a OneDrive for business, but there's also a OneDrive personal. So what this is saying is I can move data from my SharePoint site to my business OneDrive, but I can also move it to my personal OneDrive. Sometimes that can cause businesses issues, particularly if you're very security conscious. There are other ways to manage that outside of policies that we won't get into today, but it does become a little bit more complicated at that point. So rule of thumb, can't block a Microsoft connector because it will just say you can't block it, you're not allowed. So that's one thing to be aware of. And as I said, there are standard and premium licenses, but again, we're not going to get into licensing costs today. There are pre-built connectors. We're going to move to our next screen. Let's just say that's my policy. Next on the list is custom connectors. Just got one on the list called ignore, right? I don't have any other custom connectors to show you, but basically if we create custom connectors, we can block or allow them in here as well. So we can create rules to use or not use custom connectors within environments. And custom connectors are basically a further way of creating open API connectors to things that don't exist already in the Power Platform. A little bit more advanced for what we would call citizen development, but very common practice in standard development of apps and solutions and business flows. So that's custom connectors, and then we have the scope. Now the scope is where we define where it goes to. Now you can obviously whack it onto every single environment that exists, but obviously you have to basically anything new that's created, it will get this as well. So you have to understand that that will be an automatic thing from day one. You can add it to multiple environments where you have to then pick, and it gives you another option to pick the environments. You can also do it the other way around, where you can give it to everything but one, right? So you can exclude, and so you go to the environments from there. So if we add to multiple and we tick forward, you can see I've got some available environments called test, dev, and default, but that's it. They're all sandbox, and as I said, just complete fictitious created environments for the purpose of development. So I could apply it to those two, but not the default, for example. So what we typically recommend doing is creating one policy that handles the default environment, and then a series of policies that are applied to certain types of environment. And there are ways of creating automatic assignment of policies to environments. There's PowerShell script approaches and things like that. But typically your strategy will define where you're going to apply the policy to. Create it in line with the strategy, apply it to the environments that you've said to do it. And then that will stop people being able to create applications or flows or anything on the Power Platform with any data connectors that you don't allow. The other area that we're going to look at in terms of governance today is Centre of Excellence, COE. Just as an introduction to what it is, it's a community developed set of tools that can be installed or enabled on the platform to give a more holistic view of the world. This is the how do I report on how many environments to have, how many apps do I have, how many flows do I have, who's it created by, etc., etc., what connectors are used, all those sorts of things. It's a more holistic way of reporting all that information. And first off to note is none of this information that's in the Centre of Excellence is kind of not available already. You just have to go to lots of different places to find it. You have to go to the admin center, you have to go to the tenant admin center, you have to go to Power Platform and look at some usage reports, you know. So all this information is available. The idea here is this is centralized so you can get to it easier. And whilst I think they're doing a really good job at producing a centralized, holistic view of the world, I don't think it's 100% yet. And I do think it has a couple of flaws that can limit some organisations. So I'll try and cover those a little bit as we go through. But what I do agree with is it is the right approach. It's a very good starter for 10, and it's absolutely better than not having anything. But you can't just install it and have governance ticked off. That's not possible. You need to do some stuff with it as well. So what I'll do is I will put a link to where you get the Centre of Excellence. There is a repo on GitHub that you can go and download it and you can start installing it. But there are some prerequisites. You do need to consider some licensing. So there is some premium licenses required. There is a service account required, and there is some setup required if you want some of the additional features. You need to create a custom connector and so on. So it's not straightforward, but it's not massively challenging too. But you do need to consider the cost of running Centre of Excellence as well. And lastly, which you'll hopefully see a little bit as we move into it, there is some choices around how you enable certain parts and whether you want to turn everything on, whether you want to absorb the cost, and what that might look like overall. So there's some pitfalls that I can help you avoid, if you like. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you 3 key areas of the tool set. Actually, 4 key areas, 3 install points, and 1 Power BI dashboard report that's going to give you a flavour of what it can do and talk you through the pitfalls as we go. So I'm in another FSP developer tenant full of fictitious building blocks and testing things and developer things that we can do. And in here, you can see we have an environment called COE test. So when you install the Centre of Excellence, it's recommended that you do it into its own environment. This becomes the Centre of Excellence environment. And you do it under a service account that's going to have all the licensing requirements met that need to be done. And I'll, again, link below to some of the Microsoft guidance docs for it as well. And you'll see here that we've installed the Centre of Excellence core components. That's where you start. You've got the Centre of Excellence nurture components. That is to help people grow and develop talent. And you've got the Centre of Excellence governance components, which is how you admin things like tidying up legacy flows and applications or things that aren't used anymore. You get a few other bits and pieces as well, like the creator kit. It's the components that run the apps that you see. They come with the install as well. So they're the various bits and pieces that make this work. It's evolved a lot over time. New versions are released all the time. It's getting better and better. The first thing that I want to say, though, and I'll say this now across the board, is to make this portable, it runs on Dataverse, which is a brilliant platform. I love Dataverse, but Dataverse is a premium connector. So if you want to run this at scale, anyone that touches the Centre of Excellence will require a premium license. And I don't think that's abundantly clear when you see how to install this. So, for example, in the Nurture Kit, there is a help hub, like a guidance video library that you can populate with how-to guides and videos that people can open. But running that app will cost a premium license for anyone that needs to run the app, which can get quite expensive because premium licenses cost between £5 and £15 per user per month. Yeah, so there's lots of multiples going on there. 10 people for 12 months is, you know, quite a deal of money to run just some help videos. So that's not abundantly clear, and you'll see this as we go through. Everything runs on a premium license in this tool. So all I wanted to do is just show you some of the bits that make up, just talk you through the ideas to give you a flavour, and then you can go away and have a look for yourselves on this. So if I go into core components, because that's where you start, this is a solution. So you'll get a solution package full of things. And inside here, you'll get lots of bits that make it work. And the bit I draw your attention to is apps and tables. Everything else is just to make it work. Right? For example, there's 100 flows. These flows are just workflows that pick up data and run it between tables to make it work. Right? The bit we're interested in is apps and tables. So if I click on apps, and I'll give you an idea of some of the things it gives you out of the box, right? And some of them are really useful, some of them are good ideas, and some of them are not. But there's an app catalog. There's a Center of Excellence command center. So if you're an admin user, you're sort of trying to start here, and it should give you all the things to use. So if I start here, right, and press play, you'll see this runs an application that is connected to those data tables. And in here, you'll see it's got some useful, handy bookmarks. Copilot can go away for a moment. It's got some tiles that basically say, here's a list of all the things, and you can favorite these, and you can pin these, and you can use these in various different scenarios. But there's an app catalog, as I sort of briefly mentioned. There is a DLP impact analysis tool, really handy tool, this one. So you create a DLP policy, and then you can go and see what problems it might cause if you apply it to an environment. That's quite a nice tool. And what you find is this has got some really great ideas, and sometimes the only limitation is the cost of running them. The DLP one is a great one because actually you can run that all from the service account. Log in, check your DLP policy, see if it's going to cause an impact. If it is, do the remediation action. If it's not, apply the DLP policy. That's a great one. However, when you get into nurture, right, and this says, I'm a maker, give me some best practices and some training, anyone clicking that will need a license, right? So you can see there's various tools in the box that come from Center of Excellence. But the bit I get kind of excited about, which, sad or not, is the data tables. The data tables basically go and collect all the information together, and you've then got sort of actionable points where you can do your own business processing, right? And you can add your own workflows because all of them are data points. So, for example, there is it's called Power Apps data table, and in here it lists up all the apps that are being built across all of the environments. That's not a helpful view of the world. I'd have to put the name into view, but lots and lots of data points. I think it's just called name. There you go, app display name. Let's pop that on the list like so. And you'll see if I scroll across, there'll be a whole bunch of test, right? Nothing real in here, as I said, but you can see all of the apps. And as you can see, there are 392 apps. If you didn't have this visible, you'd have to go to the admin center and go through each environment one at a time to find this information. So it puts it centrally on a list. But what I like is that every time something's edited on here, you can run a workflow, right? So you could say, if an app is edited, do this, right? So if an app is edited to use connector Y, tell me, right? And this is where we get into the how can we handle the unblockables, right? Put some rules in place to handle them. Do some stuff in the background ourselves to manage those things. So I wanted to show the tables. But basically, this is what you're installing, right? You're installing a set of tools to help you manage the platform. Going back, we have the nurture components. Nurture is kind of one of those that is, I think, has great ideas, but again, because of the execution and the cost of it, they're less likely to be used, right? So Video Hub, you can upload videos of training quality standard links and things for people to use, which sounds like a great idea. But If I click on that, premium license required. So actually you wouldn't use that in a typical business that doesn't want to spend a lot of money on licensing. You would create your own version of it using SharePoint, which is not premium, and you'd have your own front end, which is a Canvas app that doesn't cost anything for your users to run. So it's a good idea, but I wouldn't use it, right? Nurture app, right? This is the what's the best practice ways of doing it. Give me some good examples. Showcase the best stuff in the organization. Same problem. It's going to cost you a premium license just to open it as an end user. So you probably wouldn't do it. And the admin version is how you get data on it. So again, nurture becomes a little bit less of a favorite solution for me and our customers that we work with. Moving on, governance is the final one. This has got some really good ideas in it. Again, need to consider the execution of this as an organization. But this is the cleanup. This is the tidy up, right? This is the I've got a busy environment and I need to keep it cleaned up. So you have an inactivity flow monitor, and it sends notifications to say, this app hasn't been used for 30 days. Do you still need it? And then it sends a notification to the person who made it, and they can choose to review it, to deal with it, or ask an admin to whitelist it. Don't ask me again, I need it, but I might not use it very often. Whitelist it, please, which is another great tool. But every person that gets a notification that needs to come and review this in the app needs a premium license. The common limitation with these tools is that cost. Do I really need that to notify the user? Do I really need the user to come in here and press a button on an app? Or do I just need to know about it and reply to the app and tell me, and I'll deal with it as an administrator? Lots of things to think about in that one. Clean up old objects is another really good one. So this hasn't been used for a period of time type process. Go and review it, go and manage it, go and whitelist it, whatever you need to do. That's the app that actually does the work behind it. Developer Compliance Center is another one that's really good for the front door process. It gives us an ability to log data against my application. Tell me what it's used for, tell me what environment it's for. So that's governance. But the final bit, so bringing it back to the positives, all that data is being collected. There is that connects into our data source. So you'll see here that this is the Power BI dashboard report. It's got an overview of Power Apps, and it says, look, here's the count by environment, right? Top 20 environments. There again, demo, test, demo, test, right? But this is where all the apps are being built, right? So there's 13 in Center of Excellence. There's 4 in that one. These are the makers. System account, everything's system account because it's just the account that we use on this one. Paul is the guy that created the tenant. Sandy's obviously not a real person because she's a TV presenter. Fictitious people in there creating bits and pieces being reported on. But it's nice because you can see total environments, total makers, total custom connectors that are being created and used, total number of app makers, total number of flow makers. And all of these are actionable data points, right? So when something happens, so if I get another custom connector, send a workflow notification is possible. And there's a bunch of different things here. So like I said, that's Power Apps, that's Power Automate. You can look at holistically at environments. You can look in more detail at apps where it breaks down who it is, who the makers are and how much they're making, custom connectors. So there's loads of reports in here. In fact, to the point where there's probably too many. And often you can't sort of see the wood through the trees, or it might not slice it in the way that you want to see it as an organization. So what we do with this is we actually often gather requirements of reporting, run through this top to bottom. What are all the things you kind of want to see? What are all the things that are kind of missing? And we might create our own version of this, right? A separate your organization Center of Excellence report that runs completely separately with its own tabs and its own filters that is useful to you, rather than having to pick through a bunch of, this is what we think is useful. Actually, let's find out what is useful and put it together in one report. So in summary, what we're looking to do is create a strategy to your governance that's going to cement the why, the how, the what you need to do in terms of the platform, the tools available, and the way you want to use things like environments, and deployment and so on. You then put in place data loss prevention policies and other bits and pieces that help mitigate and secure and protect against that risk, so that it forms the guardrails to what the strategy calls for. And then you use the Centre of Excellence or other tools similar to that to report on what's going on, to retrospectively ensure that all of that is adhering to what you've outlined as the strategy overall. So you sort of get this sort of complete circle of governance, if you like, where you sort of go strategy, enforcement, reporting, and retrospective action afterwards. As I said, there's a number of other things in there as well that are really useful to look into. I'm going to expand on the governance theme a little bit on the channel. I've already got a video in the pipeline for, no pun intended, for environments and things like managed environments and the way you use deployments and strategy. I've got another one in the pipeline around application lifecycle management. So there's lots of additional information. But what I'm hoping that you get from this is that there's a bit of thought that needs to go behind your platform that gives you the security, the freedom, and the governance to allow that creativity to flow through, and the efficiency savings and the opportunities to come with the platform, knowing that people are going to build in a safe and secure way. As ever, any questions, please pop them in the comments below. I will answer all of those in as swift a time as I can. Comments often lead to videos, information sharing and ideas. If you need to reach out to us and want any help with your governance, or you've already gone too far down the road of using Power Platform, please reach out to us. The contact information is in the description below, so feel free to drop us an email from there, or even just put your question in the comments. It might help others too. But like, subscribe, share the channel, and I will see you again on the next Power Platform Principles.